Hello, I'm Jarvis, contributing editor for Across the Fence, and I'm joined by WCAX-TV Sharon Meyer, along with Marco Ayala, the video editor for our program today. And we're going to have an adventure in Tuxtla Gutierrez, the capital and largest city in the state of Chiapas in Mexico. A few years ago, it was certified as a safe city because its low crime rate, and the Financial Times has declared it a city of the future. Very impressive, right, Sharon?
Yes, it is. And besides that, there's a lot to see and do here in the area, but more importantly, this is where Marco's family lives. He came to Vermont in 2004, studied communications at Champlain College, and he puts together all our travel adventures that you see here on Across the Fence, and that is a lot of work. So Marco, thank you for inviting us here to visit and being our tour guide. So what's on the schedule?
Well, I'm very glad to have you here. On the schedule, we have San Cristobal de las Casas, which is the most colonial town in Chiapas. We also have Chiapa de Corzo, which hosts La Fiesta Grande. And of course, the most iconic spot in Chiapas, the Sumidero Canyon.
Marco is very proud of his hometown, and after checking into our hotel, we were off to Marimba Park in city center. Back in 1993, a lady named Doña Elenita Cancino set up her marimba here and played every evening. Soon, people from throughout the city came to listen and dance to the rhythms of the dance song and Paso Doble. Eventually, this bandstand was added, and over the years, the park has become a symbol of Tuxtla for locals and visitors from around the world. While listening to the happy marimba melodies, this couple was an inspiration as we watched them dance the night away. Enjoy along with us.
Marco was anxious for us to meet his family.
Hello, I would like to introduce my sister and my mother, Ana and Ana.
Hi, Vermonters. Nice to meet you. Hola, bienvenidos a Chiapas. Espero que lo disfruten.
Salud!
Later, we stopped by to say hello to Eloisa, his 85-year-old grandmother who recently lost her husband. Now she lives alone but is pretty much self-sufficient. We had a good visit, and before we left, she suggested we go to San Cristobal de las Casas, one of her favorite places. With no plans for the afternoon, we took her advice and headed for San Cristobal. Just last year, Pope Francis visited the city of less than 200,000 people to show his support for the often ignored indigenous peoples in this part of Mexico. One of his major speeches was delivered at the cathedral, symbol of the city and dedicated to St. Christopher, their patron saint. Just in front is the plaza, often used as a rallying point for those working on behalf of Native peoples, who make up almost 40% of the population here. We were told they're talented artisans and make beautiful textiles, jewelry, ceramics, and much more, all to be found at the Santo Domingo market. Anna and Marco, who have been here many times, said it was a short walk, so off we went. Along the way, we passed City Hall, and we wondered what this conversation was all about. Now we know. We passed a vendor selling fried crickets, and only Marco was brave enough to sample.
Are they still moving?
They're actually not bad. Try them.
Nope. Soon we arrived at the Santo Domingo market. Enjoy along with us.
Bienvenidos a San Cristobal.
On our way back to Tuxtla, we stopped at Rancho Nuevo Cave, opened to the public back in 1960. The limestone hills in the area are full of caves, but this is one of the few developed for tourism. It was cool and damp inside, but an excellent place to view dozens of stalactites and stalagmites along this half-mile concrete path. Most impressive is the stairway to heaven that stretched some 50 feet up from the abyss below. We could have stayed longer, but it was getting late and there was one more thing that 3 of us wanted to do. And that was ride this 100-foot concrete slide while sitting on squash plastic bottles for added speed. Sharon and I were happy to just record the event for all of you to enjoy.
We've arrived at the lakes of Montebello, a national park close to the border of Guatemala. It's a large area made up of 59 shimmering blue lakes in the pine forest with 2 Mayan ruins nearby. This is a remote area, but we're going to try to visit one of them, Chinkultik, founded back in the 3rd century. But first we're going to check out some of these beautiful lakes. The lakes of Montebello are famous for their striking colors, which vary due to their different mineral contents. They range from emerald to turquoise, constantly changing as the water ripples in the sunlight. Recently, scientists have expressed concern that the lakes may be losing their color due to contamination. Efforts are now underway to preserve this natural treasure with help from the Chiapas state and several Mexican universities to help educate locals to be more aware of the importance of environmental conservation that keeps tourists like us coming back. With flattery like that, I would come back anytime. But there's another issue to be dealt with, and that's at International Lake.
Those white markers are the border of Mexico to the right and Guatemala to the left. We were in a quandary. Should we turn back or proceed? Seeing no customs officers, we cautiously stepped into Guatemala and were welcomed by this large sign without showing any identification whatsoever and being completely ignored by the locals. It was most surreal, like we had done something wrong, but no one seemed to care. While the others shopped, I filmed this elderly lady making her way back up the hill towards Mexico.
Well, I've always enjoyed Mexico, and certainly my favorites are the archaeological sites and the ruins.
And true to his word, upon arriving at Chinkultik, Rene ran up the steep path, leaving us far behind. This splendid site dates back to around 600 AD and was one of the most remote areas of the Maya civilization, remaining active for some 600 years. First explored less than 50 years ago, archaeologists believe Chinkultik gained prominence due to the fact that it held prisoners from other cities, like our San Quintin. Many Mayan stelae have survived with inscriptions that indicate water worship and reverence to the sun were the main religious themes that first inspired construction in this remote area.
It was getting late, but there was another site that Rene wanted to visit, Tenam Puente. We got there just as the place was closing. With the setting sun and jungle sounds, for a moment, we felt as though we had stepped back in time and were a part of this ancient city. Meaning fortified place, Tenam Puente was on an important trade route linking it with Guatemala and beyond. Construction is very unique, as to build the site, the Maya leveled the land to make 5 terraces at different levels, creating tiered plateaus with structures on each that used no mortar to hold these perfectly cut stone pieces in place. We had just time to watch the setting sun and marvel at the skill and ingenuity of these ancient people.
Bright and early the next morning, we were off to the Sumidero Canyon, but we had to stop at this roadside mercado. Enjoy along with us. When traveling to these remote places in Mexico, it's wise not to run low on gas, as service stations are few and far between. In emergencies, you can stop at places like this and buy a pricey gallon or two to get you home. But not to worry, Marco knows these surroundings well and had a full tank of gas before we left. Soon we arrived at the launching area for our boat ride through Sumidero Canyon. It was carved by the Grijalva River over the course of millions of years that stretches some 300 miles from Guatemala to the Gulf of Mexico. Blessed by this beautiful day, we passed under the Belisario Dominguez Bridge and were in the canyon. Designated a national park in 1980, the towering granite walls reach almost a mile into the sky and zigzag some 9 miles along the river. It's a sight to behold. Hemmed in by these towering cliffs, Sumidero is one of Mexico's most dramatic ecotourism parks where endangered Marley crocodile still survives, along with dozens of American black vultures sunning themselves along the shore. There are interesting caves and rock formations along the way, like the Cave of Colors that holds a statue of Guadalupe, the patron saint for the tour guides of the Sumidero Canyon. And here's the Christmas tree, where centuries of dripping mineral deposits, now covered by moss, really do look like a Christmas tree, if only we had some colorful ornaments to hang. This majestic canyon is tinged with tragedy. In 1528, it was the site of an epic battle between Spaniards and Chiapanecan Indians for control of this part of Mexico. Very much outnumbered, they chose to jump from the cliffs rather than surrender to the invading Spanish forces. Chiapas continues to have one of the largest indigenous populations in Mexico, with almost 1 million people who continue to speak their native languages.
We've traveled to Chiapa de Corzo, the oldest colonial town in the state of Chiapas, to help celebrate the Great January Festival. It is a tradition dating back to 1711 that brings indigenous people from miles around to celebrate the Fiesta de los Parachicos.
Being a part of this celebration is the very reason we chose to be here in mid-January. While I tell you a little about it, enjoy the sights and sounds along with us. The celebration continues a myth about Doña Maria, a beautiful Spanish woman from Guatemala whose son was very ill. After seeking traditional medical cures that all failed, she came here to Chiapa de Corzo, where she found an Indian healer. He told her to take the boy for 9 days to the cleansing waters of Kumbuhoyu, a nearby lake, and he was cured. It is said the healers wore masks of white men so as not to scare the child while practicing their ancient rituals, the reason they are still part of this celebration of life. Years later, when Doña Maria learned that famine and disease had struck the town, she returned to distribute free food in her son's honor. Now every January, indigenous people from miles around gather to celebrate and thank her with the Fiesta de los Parachicos. Translated, it means Festival for the Boy. Dancers parade around the entire town, carrying holy images with stops at churches along the way to honor their patron saints. They wear elaborate hats made from ixtle, a fiber obtained from the yucca plant, and carry tin rattles called chinchins.
The girls' dresses are all handmade, taking hours, embroidered with multicolored flowers and decorated with lace. Proud parents get their children involved at an early age and proudly showed us their lovely costumes. The celebration embraces all aspects of local life, promoting mutual respect among communities, groups, and individuals, including strangers like us who came all the way from Vermont to walk with them, something we'll never forget. This tradition was named an Intangible Cultural Heritage by UNESCO in 2010, and we're so happy we could share this amazing day with all of you.
Unfortunately, we have to bid adios to Tuxtla in our time here in Chiapas. A big thanks to Marco for being an excellent tour guide, and it was a real pleasure to meet his family. From Sharon, Rene, Marco, and me, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you for future adventures here on Across the Fence.
Adios!